Okay, Yamiche, please stay with us. Joining us as well for the conversation, we have CNBC senior analyst and commentator Ron Insana, and Yale Law School Paul Tsai China Center senior fellow Sam Sachs. Welcome to you both. Ron, you first here. Markets are rebounding. The April jobs report was better than expected, but the president is not backing down from most of his unilateral tariffs, including those on China. What will be the near future impact on the economy, and is a recession still possible?
Yeah, I think we've backed away a little bit from recession risk, only insofar as the underlying economy, pre-tariff anyway, has been doing reasonably well. I mean, the GDP figures that we saw earlier in the week were somewhat misleading, and there's some underlying strength in consumer spending and business investment. The trade numbers, because of the pull forward of imports ahead of the tariffs, kind of messed up the GDP math a little bit and made it look like we were contracting when we were probably still growing. And then the labor market numbers that we got on Friday were reasonably strong. We're seeing some deceleration, though, in the economy. We're hearing it from airline companies. We're hearing it from hospitality companies. We're hearing it from consumer companies. McDonald's, for instance, had its worst same-store sales since the pandemic. And so it does appear that consumers are pulling in their horns. The big question here, Alex, as you rightly point out, is how long will this process last of trying to negotiate a deal, especially with China? If it drags on for months and months and months, we will not see goods from China coming to our shores. We will see empty shelves, and that will raise the risk of recession, layoffs, and other types of contractions that businesses and adjustments that businesses will have to make in order to ride out this storm, however long it lasts.
So, Sam, China agreed to begin trade talks with the U.S., but only if Trump removes his unilateral tariffs. And Trump said he's not lowering those 145% levies unless Beijing gives the U.S. something he considers substantial. Do you see China blinking first? I mean, how far will President Xi go in inflicting pain on the Chinese people in order to win this trade war?
Well, first, Alex, I'd say there's confusion about whether the two sides are even talking. The indication as of Friday is China said they're considering talks. Earlier, Trump said he's waiting for Xi Jinping to call, and now we're talking. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs denied that as fake news. I think Xi and the leadership in Beijing does not want to look weak. They don't want to have a President Zelensky moment in the White House. So right now, we're still in a game of chicken about our talks actually happening.
Which, let me ask you, Yamiche, because this week, the last Chinese cargo ships carrying goods without Trump's crippling tariffs, they arrived in U.S. ports. Chinese imports have steadily plummeted since Trump's tariffs went into effect, and American consumers can soon expect price hikes and potentially empty shelves. So how is the White House responding to these concerns? I mean, when might negotiations with Beijing begin? Are they saying anything about it that we can factually sort of corroborate with China?
Well, Alex, that is the key question. When will these negotiations actually start? It's not clear when that's going to happen. As you said, China's ministry has said that if the U.S. wants to start negotiations, that they need to do away with these unilateral tariffs. And they also said that the U.S. has expressed interest in wanting to start negotiations. They've also, because there's been a lot of statements out of China, they've said at one point that the U.S. needs to stop putting out confusing information and really misleading people into thinking that these negotiations are happening. Of course, President Trump has been saying, well, yeah, there are talks happening. I have talked to President Xi. What's clear is that he hasn't talked to him since these tariffs went into effect and this escalating trade war got started. So it's just not clear when this is going to happen. And U.S. officials, White House officials are essentially saying, especially through the National Security Council, the last statement we got was that there are still conversations happening through normal diplomatic channels. That was the language there, but it's just not clear when these negotiations will actually kick started and when these two leaders, which are really going to be at the heart of whether or not this thing can get worked out, whether or not President Xi and President Trump can really sit down and work this out. We're just not clear when that's going to happen and if it's going to happen at all.
Yeah. And Republicans, Ron, are trying to figure out how to pay for the trillions in tax cuts in President Trump's big, beautiful spending package. The administration says tariffs will pay for the tax cuts and then pay down the national debt. Doing the math, does this add up for you?
No, I mean, not even in the least. I mean, when you look at this, and he also, by the way, the president brought up the notion of eliminating income taxes for people making under $200,000. Then he floated the notion of eliminating the income tax altogether. If you wanted to do that, not that it would be possible, you would have to have 125% tariffs on all goods coming to the United States. You know, we have income taxes a total around $4 trillion, and we have about $3 trillion worth of imports. So in order to make any of those numbers work, you know, you really have to engage in some, you know, fantastical math in order to arrive at some of the conclusions the president has. So, and this is not the way you do it, because when you do impose massive tariffs, you also get a drop off in demand because prices go up and products disappear.
And there will be fewer toys to look forward to this year. New York Times reports this, quote, "This Grinchy pronouncement by the president had the value of being truthful. Many American toy makers and retailers have started to pause their orders as the effects of Trump's tariffs ripple out, threatening to snarl supply chains. It could all have a big impact on this year's holiday season, since it takes months to manufacture, package, and ship many products to the U.S. But the impacts are expected to be felt sooner than that. NBC News is reporting this, quote, "President Donald Trump's massive China tariffs are jeopardizing American fireworks shows, threatening to drive up prices and limit supplies. U.S. fireworks wholesalers and distributors say they've been canceling shipments from China for this year's 4th of July holiday. Some are also halting manufacturing in China of fireworks for next year's celebrations of the 250th anniversary of America's independence." Donald Trump asking Americans to put up or shut up with the consequences of his economic policies is where we start today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. CNBC senior economics reporter Steve Liesman is back. Also joining us, publisher of The Bulwark, host of the Focus Group podcast, Sarah Longwell's here. And with me at the table, U.S. financial commentator for the Financial Times, writer of the Unhedged newsletter, Robert Armstrong is back with us. Steve Liesman, I start with you. There was a moment in our conversations when the only data point we had was the market going up or down. We now have the thing that I feel like you and I have been gnawing at since this all began, and that is the real world consequences. People having to make very difficult choices about what their families can afford around the holidays, things that you can see and feel. And it's almost comedic, but ruining the 4th of July.
Yeah, well, these things are probably going to happen. There is some inventory in the country right now. It's pretty interesting what happened. The reason that GDP report was negative was because there was this influx of imports, which are subtracted from the total growth numbers. So there is some inventory around. When it actually hits, there's an expectation. If you look at the maps of the ships not being in the ports right now, you can be pretty sure that it's going to happen. And then you're going to get, I believe, some increase in prices because either the tariffs will be piled on or there'll be a scarcity of certain goods. I don't think that this is escapable at this point because of the supply chain time it takes to order something, have it made in China and bring it to the United States. It's not as if over some period of years, Nicole, we could probably work this out. But the idea of slapping these 145% tariffs on and really quite sizable tariffs on other countries outside of China means that the global supply chain that companies have been working for a couple decades now has been pretty massively disrupted to the point where you may not even know what your tariff's going to be. There's something called bonded warehouses, Nicole, that I would offer you as a piece of interesting economic insight here. And that's a place where products go before they have to be pay tariffs on. They're kind of, it's like a storage area. That's a kind of, it's not in the country yet. And these bonded warehouses are full. And if the tariffs remain, that stuff may be sent back, because if you're a retailer and you ordered something for 100, well, now it's going to cost 245 or something along those lines. And so you may not be able to pay for it. You may send it back. So we are in a deep purgatory here, a deep uncertainty. And tomorrow we'll get the jobs report and we might get the first inkling of how this is affecting jobs in America.
I have some reporting from a neighborhood toy store of exactly what you're describing from the owner of a toy store in a real neighborhood serving real people that live there. I want to ask you, though, a question about whether we're at a point now where we might have a recent historical parallel. I mean, when the COVID pandemic hit, there were supply chain crises, right? I mean, everyone remembers the run on toilet paper and whatnot, but that was a global pandemic, and there were things to point to, and in the end, people did blame Donald Trump's handling, but there was something tangible to explain it. Is there any story that the White House could manufacture to explain these goods sitting in warehouses and not coming here because the prices are either unknown or too high, which sounds like what you're articulating, other than what Trump has done with his inexplicable, arbitrary, and chaotic tariff bonanza?
Well, he tried yesterday to blame the stock market on Biden, and I think there was a lot of laughter around Wall Street, I think, on that one. I think that people pretty squarely put this on the shoulders of President Trump. You're right, though. Economists are calling this what is known as a supply shock. You can go back to perhaps the 70s with the oil price shocks. That was a supply shock, and the pandemic as well. You know, what's interesting about this, and I'm sorry, but a little bit worrisome in this score here, is that most recessions end up being ones of demand. People can't afford things because they lose their job. This supply shock is not easily handled through the normal tools that we handle downturns in, which is that you end up trying to get people to buy more. But if the problem is that there's not enough stuff and people are losing their jobs because of that, goosing demand is not going to help.
See, people are worried about empty shelves. Empty shelves, guys. And this is not unavoidable. It's not. There are moments in history, like with the pandemic, we saw it, that supply chains were affected. Supply chains were affected because in a lot of countries that shut down, workers couldn't work as much without exposing themselves. So there had to be social distancing. It slowed down production. It slowed down distribution. It slowed down shopping. It slowed down unloading the ships and loading the ships. And that led to, not just in the U.S., but almost everywhere, shortages and supply chain breakdowns that led to empty shelves. Biden probably could have, like with any world leader, done things around the edges to make it better, but it was not Biden's fault that happened. This time, though, it is Trump's fault because he did this policy. It's a direct result of his policy. Trump's policy is making it uneconomical. It's making it so that some companies literally cannot operate with the new cost margins. Things are too expensive, and while hypothetically they could pass the cost along to consumers, in some cases it doesn't make sense. They just know, through their data that people won't buy X good at X price, and so you might as well not ship it. And so that, combined with the uncertainty, combined with the tariff escalation and upon escalation, as that happens, right? It's leading to empty shelves. That's entirely what's causing this. Trump could solve the issue by just giving up his tariff fight. Probably take a few weeks to a few months to get out of this mess that he's built, but the issue could be fixed. This is entirely his fault. And this is why people are mad. People are mad about the empty shelves. People are mad about the higher prices. People are mad about the goods they will no longer be able to buy, even if they had the money to buy them, because other people don't have the money to buy them, and now the good doesn't make sense to produce. Donald ruined his own economy in less than 110 days.